Hi, my name is Clevenger, and this is Addressing Student Achievement Through ACT Preparatory Courses at Southside High School. This is a project for IL 632, Research and Instructional Leadership at Jacksonville State University. Let's get right to it. The primary focus of public education is the advancement of the next generation of students. And student advancement is linked directly to academic achievement in the United States today. When we talk about academic achievement, what we're really talking about is ACT scores. And the importance of ACT scores breaks down into two main categories. First, ACT scores are important for individual students. And they're important for individual students because ACT scores are required for entrance to most post-secondary institutions today. But also, ACT scores are a widely accepted measure of academic achievement for individuals seeking scholarships. So for the individual student, an ACT score is personally important. For the whole school, ACT scores are also important. And that's mainly because of a program called the Alabama Annual Report Card for Schools. Within that program, academic achievement amounts to 20% of that score for individual schools. And academic achievement score is essentially the ACT scores for a school's 11th grade students. Okay, so let's talk about Southside High School specifically so that you get to know a little bit about the group of students that I get to work with all the time. Table 1 here gives you a demographic breakdown of Southside High School students. Southside High School serves 790 students currently in grades 9 through 12. And what you see there breaks down to this essentially. Females make up 46.8% of the population. Males make up 53.2%. Caucasian students are the largest percentage at 90.5%. African American students comprise 5.7% of the population. Asian students number 2.8%. And American Indian Alaskan Natives make up 1% of the population of students at Southside. Free lunch students make up 19.1% of the population, and reduced lunch students make up 6.3% of the population. So that gives you an idea of the group of students that make up Southside High School. Now let's look at ACT scores. When we're talking about academic performance and that kind of thing, ACT scores are the key to look at. So let's look at that together. Students in Alabama began taking the ACT in 2015 in school. And from 2015 to 2018, students' average composite scores were on the rise at Southside. However, in 2019, students' average composite scores fell 0.3 of a point. Now that might not seem like a lot, but any kind of shortfall is going to be one of those things that sends off all kinds of alarms for the assistant principal who's in charge of curriculum and instruction, and that's me. So I began to look for reasons that might inform me a little bit about that shortfall. I first went back and looked at students' pre-ACT scores from their 10th grade year, because all students in Alabama also take the pre-ACT as 10th graders. I was able to identify a group of students called the on-the-cusp students on the pre-ACT. And what you see here in chart 1 is the percentages of students who fell within those ranges. 33.3% of students were on the cusp in English. 18.2% were on the cusp in math. 24.2% were on the cusp in reading. And 53% were on the cusp in science. Now what that really means is these students did not benchmark on the pre-ACT. However, the pre-ACT believes that those students with the right instruction have the potential to make benchmark on the ACT. And those students are interesting for this study because they become the study group itself. Okay, I also went back and looked at those same on-the-cusp students and their performance in classrooms and their classroom grades during the 10th grade. So what you see here in chart 2 is that same group of students and their performance for the entire year in all of their classes. And what you can tell from this is that the number of low performers is very small. The number of medium to high performers is very high. So there's a discrepancy between the student's performance in class with the student's performance on the pre-ACT. And that, in my mind, warranted more study as well. That's sort of where I came up with my hypothesis statement, which you're going to get to see right now. Excuse me. My hypothesis statement: on the cusp students at Southside High School in 2019-2020 who participate in an ACT preparatory course will achieve higher ACT composite scores than on the cusp students at Southside High School in 2019-2020 who do not participate in an ACT preparatory course. Now, that might take a little bit of explaining. First, on the cusp students, we've kind of already gone over that, but that's students who did not benchmark on the pre-ACT, but who have the potential to benchmark on the actual ACT. ACT prep course. An ACT preparatory course is a course within a student's daily schedule that offers ACT skills practice, practice ACT tests, and one-on-one instruction from a high-qualified teacher. ACT composite scores. These are scores that represent the combined scores of all ACT subtests: English, math, reading, and science. And so those are things that make up the hypothesis statement that I came up with. All right, so let's talk about the subjects for this study. Southside High School 11th grade on the cusp students made up 137 students in total. And so I gave informational invitation letters to all 137 of those on the cusp students. And those invitations were to intensive interventions for 1 month leading up to the ACT on March 10th of the year 2020. So in those intensive interventions, 20 hours of one-on-one instruction in after-school tutoring was offered by highly qualified teachers. Additionally, 4 hours of large group test skills reviews during school were offered as 8 30-minute sessions during that 1 month leading up to the test. 39 of those 137 students chose not to participate in this intensive intervention. And that's where I came up with my control group. 98 students chose to participate in the intensive interventions, and that's how I came up with my experimental group. Now, of course, the independent variable here is the intensive interventions themselves and whether those things actually work, and that's what I began to try and see. In terms of the data that was collected, we've already talked about pre-ACT scores and ACT scores. There's one other piece of data that was part of this study. It's a student reflective survey. All students, all 137 students in the on the cusp range were given a student reflective survey at the end of everything after the ACT to gauge what their thoughts of all of their ACT prep stuff that they did was. And so those reflective surveys were an additional piece of data that was collected. Along the way, quite a bit of literature was reviewed in determining what we needed to do in terms of this whole program. There are a couple of quotes here for you that give you an idea of what was reviewed. The first is from Moss, Chimmendale, Mershon, and Carney. They posited that evidence shows that ACT scores are in fact becoming increasingly more important to students, their high schools and colleges they attend. That was in 2012. And then in 2016, Zhu and Liu suggested that many school leaders found success with training programs utilized by building level administrators such as ACT practice tests and ACT review sessions. And so those are a couple of the ideas that led to this study that you see in the formal presentation. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the design of the study itself. I used a causal comparative design, and there are three main reasons for that. First, causal comparative designs are used when you're comparing two groups of students that already exist, and my groups did already exist. Second, causal comparative designs are best for giving clear data that can be used to explore the independent variable of the study. And again, since I was trying to see whether this intense intervention was something that was useful for students, that independent variable could be studied this way. And finally, causal comparative design is good for supporting the ethical considerations of the study. I certainly did not want to offer interventions to one group and not offer it to all the students who had the potential to do well with this intervention. So causal comparative allows me to do that, allows me to consider those kind of ethical ideas. There were a few threats to this design. Absenteeism, internal motivation of students, and time were all things that were sort of outside of my control. I couldn't control whether someone came to school or not. I couldn't control whether the student cared or not. And I certainly wasn't in control of the time, which is always bearing down upon us. But those are some of the threats to the design itself. What you see here is a slide that shows you the month-by-month breakdown of my activities. Many of the things were heavy in the beginning in terms of research and getting my data in place, but eventually in February, that's when we actually did begin to perform the interventions, and that led all the way into March when the kids took the ACT. And then from that point forward, tabulating the data was a part of the whole project, and then analyzing and interpreting that data. So getting all of this together has taken quite a bit of time, pretty much all of the second semester of school. And to do that, I used inferential statistics, just to give you an idea of the method of data analysis used. I looked at the mean, the median, and the mode of the student data that I was given, and that was the students' ACT scores. So the mean, the median, and the mode of student ACT scores were used, and that was all used to compare the performance of students who participated in the interventions, as opposed to those students who did not choose to participate in the interventions. And now to talk about the importance of these anticipated findings. My hypothesis was that on the cusp students at Southside High School in 2019-2020 who participated in these ACT prep courses were going to achieve higher ACT composite scores than on the cusp students who did not participate in these ACT prep courses. And I really feel like this data will likewise show that that is actually the case. The data is going to be useful for Southside High School first because Southside's going to be able to show an increase in academic achievement, which will directly impact individual students and the school's overall state report card. But secondly, Southside High School is also going to be able to justify funding more intervention activities like these activities described in the study in the future. I saw great strides in participation while the study was underway, both with students and with teachers, and I have real confidence the results of this year's ACT tests are going to support our efforts. I look forward to the culmination of all this work by both students and teachers, and that culmination is going to be hopefully that these ACT scores are exactly what we wanted them to be. So let me walk you through just a few references. These last 5 screens are the references that were used in that review of literature that I mentioned to you, and that just shows you that there's quite a bit of research in this area that suggests that ACT prep courses are important. Thank you for your time today. As I said in the beginning, our primary focus at Southside High School is student advancement, and this study was predicated upon that mission. I anticipate findings that will support more efforts of this nature in our school's future. Thank you very much for your time.